Alrighty, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster warm-up sessions. Just another fun little episode. We got something tasty on drip, as always, and we'll go ahead and get some caffeine into our bodies, which I don't know how healthy that is at this hour, but it always hits all the right spots when it's extracted well, that is. It's not hitting the spot.
Probably won't finish this cup, but it's okay.
It's kind of disappointing. What's going on? What happened?
I just don't like this coffee.
You had this coffee at home, huh? And was this what it tasted
I
like?
cupped this coffee alongside our coffees. It's kind of what it tasted like. I mean, the extraction's probably messing with the fact that, again, are we ever dialed? I mean, sometimes.
I mean, I
just don't like this coffee. That's about it.
It's kind of lacking, like, sweetness.
It kind of also tastes like nothing with a little bit of acidity. That's about it.
Yeah. That's
it.
Exactly what was going on. I'm like, this tastes like nothing with some acidity. That's it. It just tastes like almost like flavored coffee. I don't know. It's a bummer because I've had some of their other coffees, which hopefully the bag's not in the shot. It's not.
No.
Okay, cool. I was like, I'm not going to about to say this, but yeah, I've had their coffee before and I've had better experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Than this.
You bought me their coffee and it was better.
Yeah, which is just kind of a bummer, you know. I actually think I had this coffee at espresso from them.
Wow.
And it actually tasted better.
Maybe it's all our fault.
But I don't think so.
It's always a weird tension.
Great, yeah.
Because it's always like, was it brewing with the problem or was it the roasting?
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do on the brewing part.
You're right. There's only so much you can do. I mean, the further you get from origin, the further you get, the less control you really have over it.
Yeah.
Where to the point where it's like, cool, once it's in your kitchen, there's almost nothing that you can do to fix anything before, and you're pretty much like the last step before it goes into your onto your tasting palate. But
and no matter what I mean, you can have like a $10,000 grinder, and if it's a underdeveloped and baked roast, your grinder isn't going to fix that.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, that's the bummer. I don't know, but it is what it is. You know, stuff happens. Who knows? You know, maybe it's kind of. I mean, I think I've said this before on the podcast, where if I'll go into a cafe and I have a subpar experience, I'll usually never judge the coffee shop on just that one experience.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know.
There's way too many factors.
Way too many factors. You know, it was extremely hot one day, you know, and it hit off the temperatures in the roastery or something like this. Somebody did a little different between batch protocol and, you know, DTR, you know, percentage, time, you know, all the color, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we've roasted coffees where it's like you just push a little darker or you go a little lighter and all of a sudden it's like, this coffee's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a bummer. But that being said, like, I think the cool thing about the coffee industry recently has been the cool and, bad thing. Well, we're about to talk about that. But one of the cool things about the coffee industry recently is that there's been so much cool stuff that's being released and dropped.
Oh, yeah.
Which the aim for all these cool things that are dropping is to have a better experience, whether that's at home, in the cafe, or in the roastery for us. You know, like I'm happy with the roaster that we have. It's a Diedrich IR12, 12 kilo. It just does everything the way it should.
Yeah.
There's small little gripes that I have with it that I'm like, I wish it was a little different. But at the end of the day, it does where I couldn't have said that maybe with a machine from 20 years ago or with their technology, you know, or whatever. I mean, that's Same with, the cafe experience, the home brewing experience. There's a lot of cool things that's happening in innovation.
Yeah. I mean, on the cafe part, like espresso machines, when Victoria Arduino released, what is it, Eagle One line with the Prima one, like the single group head, like that was a whole new way. Well, maybe not a whole new way, but the innovation there was like to be more eco-friendly and not to use as much water, maintain the same amount of heat. Like that was super cool. And then just the ergonomics, the design, absolutely beautiful. And then when the KB90 was released by La Marzocco, like the whole auto purge, the whole what do you say? When the portafilter goes in the group head, it kind of just clicks in automatically. That helps baristas a lot.
Insane.
I don't think any machine does that. That's the only machine that does it, I think. So like stuff like that I think it's super cool. I mean, we've talked about the puck press on here before, and that's a very cool piece of technology that's been created in a great device. But then on the smaller scale, it's like one of the most popular brewers, I would say, defines the specialty coffee third wave is the classic conical brewer, the Hario V60, tried and true. It's been everywhere, and it's like, in my opinion, it's becoming that timeless piece. That has been like, I would say, fairly consistent, and from that concept, a lot of stuff has come out.
Oh, for sure. I mean, right now, still the V60, which, man, I could be completely butchering this, but I feel like it started getting really big during some barista championship, I think, in like around 2005. I could be completely wrong, which I probably am wrong about the barista championship, but around 2005 was when it had its massive just explosion in the industry. That's almost 20 years for a brewer to be in the industry and for it to still be crushing it. Like, to say the least, timeless.
Yeah.
That's it. And it does like a really, still I think is probably like, if you want to brew coffee and you want like just something that's going to get you a solid, well, not just a solid cup, it's going to get you a spectacular cup with, beautiful results, but even at a great price. Like, what can you buy? Like a plastic V60 for, what is it, like $10, $9? That's insane.
Yeah.
How cheap and affordable, like just the cone is, that can produce world-class coffee. Like I remember when, the Saturday morning Onyx Coffee Bar was open in Bellingham. They just did pour over, no sugar, no cream, no nothing. Very interesting concept. One of the things that Kevin said was like, hey, pour over is just a very like simple and cheap way to brew like world-class coffee. Like you can get spectacular results. And that stood out to me a lot. And that was actually what pushed me and inspired me to get a V60 in the first place.
Yeah, and that's like single cup brewing. You mentioned like Brewer's Cup and the V60 being like super popular. I'm not exactly sure what year as well, but I remember that time. It was like, I believe, a Japanese contender in the World Brewers Cup, something like that. That made it like very popular, just exploded. And then when I was at U.S. Coffee Champs back before COVID, I think it was 2019 or maybe beginning of 2020, but I saw a lot of different brewers going around, which I was surprised by that because I felt like V60 was like the classic way to go. But I saw everything from Kalita being super popular. I believe I saw Origami as well. So there's like a ton of other brewers that are kind of entering that scene. Yeah,
for sure. And, recently brewers like the Origami brewer is just blowing up. I just see it on every swipe of an Instagram. It's beautiful. There. It's there. It's a beautiful piece for sure. Then you have, the fellow Stag, which just has blown up recently. I don't know. It feels like more than ever, even though it's been around for quite some time.
For a while. I brewed with it at Social Grounds.
That's crazy. Also, this is a little plug. We're gonna do a little video in the near future on YouTube about a fellow special, so to speak, that we found thrifting that is no longer on the market, but it was like a gem where I saw it and I'm like, wait, fellow made this? And it still had like the fellow instructional, but they don't sell them anymore.
Nope.
So stay tuned for that video. It's going to be on the YouTube channel, which I'm pretty stoked about that. That's just
a fun one.
Yeah, that was just truly exciting. But yeah, you know, like the fellow stuff blew up, and all of a sudden now we're getting, you know, some of the newer ones like Tricolette. What else? There was like a flat bottom. Oh, the Espro.
The Espro, and then I don't know how to pronounce it, Oreo? Or Oreo? I don't know how to say
Oreo.
When I see it, Oreo. Yeah. It's funny how I see things like with Instagram handles come like Oreo.uk or something like that.
It's the Oreo.uk brewer. Yeah.
No, that one.
You know, that one has been also making its round away, and it's like, you know, then you have the April Brewer as well.
Right.
Created by the roasting company, April Coffee Roasters in, I think, Denmark. But a lot of these brewers are, you know, being showcased with, you know, different kind of walls, different amount of holes, you know, different kind of filters and all that stuff. And then you have something like the V60 that's like timeless and has been around for like almost 20 years in the mainstream. What do you, how do you feel about that? How would you like, is it good that we're like all these new brewers are coming out? How do you feel about that? Are you stuck to the traditions of the old and you're like, I'm never leaving a V60, even though you don't brew with it anymore?
Not anymore, but I would say the easiest brewer to have a very, very simple brew would be the V60. Definitely, there's a lot of issues with a V60, bypass being the major one. Like everyone's talking about that and has talked about the fact that way too much bypass lowers your extraction. The whole shape is a problem. But when it comes to getting a classic, I would say cup of coffee, a classic brew, single cup V60. If I'm doing any kind of like basic training on like explaining extraction, I should use the V60 to train. So I would say that's the starting point. And that's also a great brewer. Like you said, for accessibility, it's very simple. You can put it on anything, a cup, anywhere, and you can just brew with it. But then also that's a very excellent brewer to take as far as you want to the next level. So I would say before jumping on to a new brewer, play around with that, understand what's happening with the coffee, not with the brewer itself, and then take those concepts and maybe move them to something else, like the flat, you know, based brewers. Like I went to the Stag X, and I'm obsessed with Stag X. Like apart from, you know, what I'm going to talk about, the biggest complaint of all, the ripple filters. I'm like, why are they ripple filters? Like I actually use a V60 filter in my Stag X so I can, you know, flatten it onto the edges, eliminate some bypass, and get a very good extraction. But that's also, I think, one thing that I'm like, man, like I want to see more filters and more innovation in that department. Brewers are one thing, but what's a brewer without a filter? We know there's some brewers that don't use filters, but majority of the time you need a filter. So I would want to see that, like for AeroPress, the Azier filters. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Acer. Yeah.
Acer or something like that. That changed the AeroPress game.
Shout out to Eldrick out of Vancouver, BC.
Right. Yeah.
We miss you.
Harkin Coffee.
Can't wait to go back. Gosh. Yeah.
But that changed the competition ring also, like for AeroPress. So that was a big deal. And like I would love to see more of that happen. Like maybe seeing like a new filter for the Stag X come out that's actually flat with no bypass ripples. Get rid of those. And change the material up and experiment with extraction levels. Stuff like that I would be pumped.
Would you say that you can get a really good cup of coffee, not just the basic black coffee, like just a cup of Joe, but would you say that you can get a pretty amazing cup of coffee from a V60?
Yeah, for sure.
So then what would be the point of moving to, say, something like the Stag? Is it, or, you know, like right there, we have like the Kalita Wave, which is pretty close to the Stag. Some differences. Like what's the point of moving to these brewers if we have a V60 that can still get us like a really decent result? Like if you've noticed, I just brought my V60 from the house here to the office because I just wanted to brew with it. I miss it. And I'm like, oh, I can see why I actually enjoy brewing with this, and the results that I'm getting and how it brews is kind of unique in the sense of, well, it's like a cone shape and whatever. But what's the point of moving to other brewers?
I mean, the classic answer would be, yeah, other brewers will give you a higher extraction percentage, which maybe not always, but a lot of the time, higher extraction percentage is a better tasting cup. So you can get a good cup of coffee with the V60, but the reason I switched to a Stacked X is I noticeably could notice that my cup of coffee changed in to the better. Like I enjoyed it more, you know what I mean? So like I switched from the V60 and went to the Stag and never went the other way unless I was like trying to compare. And because there are some coffees that you're like, man, like I just have a hunch, like maybe I want to try it on this. Like either the drip down time is too quick on a flat base brewer. And I'm like, let me experiment with a smaller dose and on a V60, go a little finer, stuff like that. Like, okay, I'll throw it around and experiment it. And that would be another answer is like, don't completely ban one brewer because you don't know what kind of coffee you'll be extracting, and it actually may be much more pleasant on a different brewer. Yeah, of course. Even if objectively numbers wise, there's like, you know, a higher extraction yield percentage. So it comes down to preference. That's a big one, but also the final taste and outcome of a cup. Yeah. Yeah.
Of course. Do you think that, I don't know, do you think that all these other brewers that are coming out, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's brewers even that I don't even know of. Yeah. I mean, brewers like the April brewer that I've even tried, I haven't even seen one in person, you know? Like, I feel like it's, I may be completely wrong, and you can rip on me in the comments section. That's fine. I don't care. Yeah. I also feel like it's just like so kind of like excessive to a certain extent, it's like extra, where it's just like, it's kind of just like extra. There's like a lot of, not to say that it's bad or anything. Yeah. And just in my opinion, I'm like, hey, give me a V60, give me like a cone shape and a flat base brewer. Yeah. And let's call it good. Yeah. And then let's figure out, how do we brew amazing coffees with what we have at hand? And that might include like, oh, I actually need a better grinder because using my Hario hand grinder, regardless what brewer you're going to brew on, might not get you spectacular results that you're expecting. But that being said, that's just my little bit of a pessimistic take on that. But at the same time, I will say that's also to a certain extent intriguing to me that so many of these companies and brands are jumping on to creating new brewers or even new grinders. Like Fellow released a grinder recently, you know, the Fellow Ode. The Niche has been a hot, you know, commodity. Now all these like, I don't even know what their names are. The Monolith,
there's so many grinders.
Now the Malkonig just released a home grinder, the X54, which looks kind of interesting. So, oh boy. But you know, one of the cool things about seeing so many brands jump on this new gear is that, well, it's actually pushing innovation. And in reality, we haven't been brewing coffee for like on a specialty realm, like on a very craft precision realm, it hasn't been that long, really.
Yeah. I think all of the industries in the world are being affected by technological growth. Yeah. We've talked about this a lot, like the fact that people went to the moon with the technology of an iPhone 3GS. Like imagine that, wild. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now we're with these mega computers in our pockets. So technology has reshaped and changed how we do life in the world. Within that, you know, brewing coffee is part of that. And I think one of the things that I'm noticing is with a lot of new brewers and grinders, like there's a lot of new gear coming out, but that's also part of the fact that we're basically trying to explore coffee. Like we have questions, we want to figure things out, we're exploring. It may not be as innovative as we want it to be, but there's this degree of like exploration, like, oh, what if we do this? How will that change this and that? You know what I mean? And that also means that we're simply learning. Like the whole industry is fairly new that we're learning. Like,
of course,
we always talk about Jonathan Gagne, like a rocket scientist, literally is like in coffee
insane.
and writing books on coffee.
Insane.
And I would say there hasn't been much education, exploration to that degree. You know, obviously barista hustle, obviously there's a lot of like smart people in the industry, but I would say there's not enough.
Yeah.
So part of that, or I would say lack of knowledge and understanding of how coffee is extracted, part of that is we're seeing that in a bunch of new brewers because we're experimenting. Yeah. So that part I'm like super pumped about.
Of course. I think, yeah, we're slowly solving problems. And, you know, sometimes like, for example, like the tricklet, I think was like a pretty bonkers idea, concept that was like, it's like one of those ideas where you're like, oh, duh. Like, I don't get why that hasn't been invented before.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like, yeah, it's a cylinder. You pour water in there and it goes through a filter, you know, like it's so, but even though it's so like, duh, yeah, it hasn't, you know, hasn't been revealed in that sense. And but, you know, with this emergence of this cool tricklet brewer, at the same time, then we start to run into other issues where people are saying like, your extraction yields are way too high, like with this. And so like we've solved one problem, but now it's creating kind of room for different issues. But at some point, somebody's going to solve both of those problems and the other problems. And yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that at some point we're going to be able to get some really spectacular brewers, filters, even grinders that are becoming so much more affordable, but are performing on such a high level. Yeah. Like that's spectacular and that's amazing. So there's a lot of excitement around that. And the cool thing is a lot of this is very accessible to the home.
Totally.
It's not like, we're not talking about, I mean, for example, like the ground control. Yeah. Like I would love to mess around, think around with one of those. They just look so fascinating. I've seen them maybe in one cafe or whatever.
Super rare.
Yeah. But it's just like a commercial beast that probably won't make, like, there's no point for it to have it in my house, even though I would not be mad.
Yeah, that would be fun. Nice little sponsorship.
Yeah.
Just experimenting at the house. Not even the roastery, just the house.
Just the house. Yeah. And it's staying there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff like that, like that is happening in two different areas of the industry. One on a very general, like, consumer level, and then one on a like a professional, like espresso machines. Like I don't know of many folks who own like a Prima one at home. I mean, I don't know of anyone personally, like you see people online, but there's a lot of like technology that is fairly commercial. But then the concepts are kind of minimalized, made simpler for home use. But I think when you combine the two, like we were saying earlier, the knowledge is like spreading out and getting like broader and bigger, which is great. Like we need that experimentation. So I'm not at all like downing like weird new creations in coffee. Like I'm not trying to like say, you know, we just need to stick to the V60 or stick to, you know, the Curtis brewer. Why do we need the ground control? Like that's not what I'm saying. That's actually really, really good. So we should continue going that way. And like everything else, you know, a fad is a fad. Things are just part of a fad. Like they're gonna just go away and people are going to continue using stuff that is proven that actually works. Yeah. And I mean, on that note, for sure. It's not, I mean, by what I said about the V60 and these new brewers, like I'm not saying that we should stop creating new brewers because I think once again, they're paving room for innovation. But one thing I will say is though, like, I think we sometimes get caught up in the gear too much. For sure. And we're like, oh man, I need this $3,000 grinder because it's going to add more sweetness to my cup. And I'm like, bud, come on. Just get a good grinder. You may be right, but listen, I would love to see you taste the difference between a $2,000 grinder and a $2,300 grinder. Yeah, exactly. You know, you know, come on. Like, I mean, we'll wrap it up with a small little story from recently. So, Sergey and I were shooting a wedding, and we're shooting the wedding and just hanging out with the photographer, and we got into some camera gear talk, and the photographer's like, I just wish I had the R5 because it has more megapixels. And I'm like, wait, why do you need more megapixels though? Like,
I mean, I guess if you're taking photos for like billboards where your photo is gonna be like expanded on like a massive surface where you need every bit of resolution, but you don't have to feel like what you have is inadequate just because it's 25 megapixels instead of 45. You know, like you still have a good solid piece of gear to work with that can still do a spectacular job. And so that was kind of like a little fun little story where, you know, we were both like, oh no, like this is a classic, also like a coffee situation where we're just, sometimes we just get carried away with gear and we don't realize like, oh wait, the stuff that we had like 20 years ago can still actually brew like a tasty cup.
Yeah, in photos, it's like, man, I remember I used to idolize the idea of winning the Pulitzer Prize, right?
Yeah.
Getting that mega award for journalism, like the best of the best. I remember when I had the Canon 60D, that year someone won the Pulitzer Prize taking a photo with a 40D. So the basics of photography, like your camera, your gear don't define the basics of photography. Yeah. Same thing in like brewing. If you understand extraction, you can get a pretty tasty cup with a V60.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you want to like, there's other reasons for you to like change a brewer. Maybe you're brewing more coffee, less coffee. Yeah, you may need to make some changes. But at the end of the day, you know, you can use the basics to get what you need.
Yeah, for sure. And there's thresholds on both sides, you know.
Right.
Doesn't mean you need to be making a pour over with your, you know, your fat tea kettle. Creating big channels.
You need some
like,
control.
Come on.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
It makes sense. But anyways, I think you guys got where we're going with this. Hopefully this spurred some food for thought, honestly, on all these new gadgets that are dropping that people are going ham over. Not that that's bad or anything, you know. So, thank you guys so much for listening. Go ahead and, you know, drop a comment in the comment section. Yeah. We want to know. We want to know what you think. We want to know, how do you feel about the Oreo? Do you like Oreos? Double stuffed Oreos? I don't know. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, whatever you're doing, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers. That little seagull. What is he doing up this late?